What if the person you trusted completely had been living two completely different lives and you had no idea? What if the girl who made your coffee every morning, who listened to your problems, who made you feel less alone in that big empty apartment, was actually worth more than you could ever imagine? But here's the twist. Here's what breaks your heart. She wasn't hiding her money because she was ashamed. She was hiding because she was afraid. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd realize you never really loved her. You loved needing her. What if love isn't about who has more power, who has more money, or who has more to offer, but about who chooses to stay honest when lying would be easier? What if this moment, when everything she's hidden comes crashing down, becomes the most beautiful thing that ever happens to both of them? Because that's when real love begins. When you choose each other despite everything. Stay tuned. What if your entire life was built on a beautiful lie? What if the person who knew every corner of your broken heart was actually the one person who could never truly know you? There she stood, in the kitchen of his sprawling penthouse, her hands trembling as she polished the crystal glasses. The evening light caught in her hair, and like every night for the past year, his eyes lingered a moment too long on her face. No one notices the maid. That's the first rule of invisibility. Make yourself so ordinary, so essential yet forgettable, that the world passes through you like wind through open windows. She'd chosen this life deliberately, though he would never understand why someone like her, intelligent, poised, with a voice that sounded like it had read every book in existence, would voluntarily scrub floors and fold clothes for someone else. He assumed poverty. He assumed desperation. He assumed she needed saving. And that assumption, while heartbreaking, was exactly what she needed him to believe. She watched how he moved through his apartment, how he took calls about properties and investments, how he wore his wealth like a second skin that never quite fit perfectly. There was a sadness in his eyes that no amount of money could cure. The first time he really saw her, not as staff, but as a person, was when she'd accidentally left a book of poetry on the windowsill. He'd found it at midnight, pages worn and annotated with thoughts that revealed a soul far too deep for someone who earned minimum wage plus board. He'd confronted her gently, and she'd lied smoothly, said she was trying to improve her English. He believed her because people believe what they need to believe. Over months, he created opportunities to talk to her, to know her, to understand the contradiction of this mysterious woman who moved through his home like she belonged in a museum, not a kitchen. But as he fell in love, and yes, he fell hard and completely, she was falling too, into a trap of her own making. Every conversation felt like a betrayal. Every moment where his hand accidentally brushed hers felt like stealing. He was building a fantasy of her, and she was becoming the fantasy, losing herself in the role so completely that sometimes she forgot she was wearing a mask. The fear started small and grew exponentially. What would happen when he discovered the truth? What would he feel when he realized that the girl he loved was actually the woman he'd spent a year thinking was beneath his notice? The night everything fractured came unexpectedly. His business partner's daughter hosted a charity gala, and she'd insisted he attend. He was confused when he walked in and saw her across the room, wearing a gown that seemed spun from starlight, her hair down for the first time, talking to investors about real estate ventures with an authority that made it clear she wasn't an employee, she was a stakeholder. She was laughing, completely at ease. Her entire demeanor transformed into someone so confident, so commanding, so absolutely not the gentle maid who'd been serving him tea every morning. When their eyes met across that ballroom, he felt his entire world tilt. The shock on his face would have been comical if it wasn't so heartbreaking. She saw the moment the pieces clicked together. The expensive designer clothes she occasionally mentioned, the way she'd sometimes received formal letters addressed with her full name, her complete fluency in languages she'd supposedly been learning. All the clues he'd ignored because they contradicted the story he needed her to be. But here's what he didn't expect. When she approached him after, when she saw the hurt and betrayal in his eyes transforming into something else, when she witnessed him falling through the moment of shock into the profound realization that every conversation they'd had was genuine, every laugh authentic, every moment of connection completely real. He understood something crucial. She hadn't been pretending with him. She'd been pretending for everyone else. With him, in that penthouse, in those quiet hours when they talked until sunrise, she'd been honest in every way that mattered. She was terrified to speak, but he was the one who found the words. You were protecting yourself. I understand that now. What I don't understand is why you stayed. You could have left any time. You could have been anyone. But you chose to be here, chose to know me, chose to let me know you. That's when the real story began. Not the hidden wealth, not the secret identity, but the question of whether love built on deception could transform into love built on choice. That's when they both realized that everything real between them had been proven genuine through the fire of truth. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone who chooses to be honest when dishonesty would have been easier. She didn't need his protection because of poverty. She needed his understanding despite her secrets. And he didn't fall in love with her wealth or status. He fell in love with her essence, which remained unchanged, whether she was polishing glasses or navigating boardrooms. The real magic wasn't the revelation. It was the redemption that followed, where both chose truth over comfort, vulnerability over protection, and each other over everything else. Because real love isn't about who you pretend to be. It's about who you choose to become when someone finally sees you completely.